Welcome back. Just in case you just joined us, this is KBC News Check, and on this second hour we are looking at matters education, and especially after yesterday's announcement pitting the Form 4 selection that was announced by the CES Education, and a number of issues have emerged. Are we ready? The first time the pioneer class for the junior secondary will be starting from the 30th of this month. And remember, we still have Form 1 placement in the midst of harsh economic times and also in the midst of a drought. But that said, some of the members or some of the pupils who were able to secure their dream schools, it was quite a joy, and some disappointment and a protest from those whose desires of the heart were not met. Some parents have said that yes, indeed, we're going to take our kids to those schools. Others have cited a number of challenges which we'll be looking at with my panel of education experts. And the CS said that all the 1.2 million, over the 1.2 million pupils who sat for their KCPE will be placed somewhere in a school. But somewhere is not quite enough for some parents. They have cited a number of challenges which we again are going to be looking at. Junior secondary will benefit from the 9.6 cash injection, where the pioneer grade 7 begins again end of this month. Today, the results of grade 6 assessment will also be announced. And let me now rope in my panel of experts. Beginning from my immediate left, we have Dr. Mark Matunga, who is an education expert and also a technology evangelist. And technology evangelist. We're telling us about that. Just next to him, we have Luka Nyambane. Luka Nyambane is also an education expert and also the head of protocol at the Mary Shaw School. Gentlemen, karibuni.
Thank you.
Perhaps we can begin. Happy New Year, Doc. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Before we even begin with what happened yesterday, maybe you can have 2 minutes of what the CS said in regards to how the education ministry is prepared for both the junior secondary and the Form 1. Let's first of all run that clip, Mugo.
Of the fact, the economic times we are in, that if we impose so many unnecessary levies, then our policy, our constitutional requirement of ensuring that education is free and accessible.
A large number of candidates did not receive proper guidance and direction when choosing schools. This resulted in some schools attracting far many applicants against their capacity. National Treasury set aside 15,000 per annum as capitation to facilitate free running in all our public schools. In total, the government will spend Kenya shillings 9.6 billion for the runners in a junior secondary school this current year.
And that's just an extract of what the CS talked about yesterday, the KIC did during the Form 1 selection result announcement. And without even looking at everything that the CS said, I remember moments ago, and Doc, you were here, when the MP, Isiolo, talked about, yes, we're talking about students and pupils to go back to school, but there'll be a number of challenges that the government never mentioned in terms of the drought situation, because if we heard about anything on food program for the northern frontier, she said that that will attract a lot of pupils and students. In your assessment, are we ready for the junior secondary and the Form 1 selection 2023?
Thanks, Troy. That's a good question, and Happy New Year to our viewers. It's a great opportunity that we are actually alive this year. To answer your question in a very brief manner, the answer is yes. Why am I saying that? Number one, education sector is no longer on steroids. With the past leader of the education sector, and I said that many times. Unfortunately, not many of my comments were carried to to the media. But I did think that the approach that the ministry was taking then was the best approach. And many times on this particular seat and table, I expressed my concerns about how the ministry was going about deploying the CBC curriculum and sectionalizing the approach and the processes that actually they needed to take. With the education sector off steroids now, because then you could not even speak. You know, whatever one person said was law, and the whole sector was actually thrown into chaos. The children were confused, the parents were confused. But the reason I'm saying we are ready is that, number one, our pupils are still there. They are alive. They are healthy. Number two, the parents are still there. For the most part, they're alive and healthy. Number three, we have our teachers who've been on a long holiday now, ready and prepared to actually go. I think that you're bringing the question with regard to all the calamities that are facing everybody around the globe. The economic downturn, the war in Ukraine, the just ended COVID issues, the drought and the famine that we've been facing for the last 6 months. Those will continue to be there. And I can tell you that, yes, going back to school, we as a country, and I believe the government, from what I've been able to see, we are ready.
And Nyambane, looking at what the CES talked about yesterday with full confidence, it's all systems go. Of course, there are a number of challenges because with every pioneer thing, you have to run into some challenges. Being an educationist, do you think we are ready to just start rolling at the end of this month?
Ben, thank you very much for this chance. I wish to state that the government has already pronounced itself, given us a policy. And of course, the national government always comes up with the national education policy that guides all the stakeholders that we have in this country in the education sector. I believe that education sector is a key component of turning around the economy, turning around, you know, the socio-economic challenges that we have in this country. I would say that a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. I believe, notwithstanding the fact that we have a variety of issues and, you know, challenges facing this country in terms of economic aspect, I believe that the CS was very clear yesterday on his address, and I do believe, of course, that we have a journey to move. As in the private sector, especially where I come from, the Merisho School, we are very, very ready, and we can be an alternative solution to another problem. And I believe that Merisho School is going to be actually the model school, especially for going forward in terms of CBC implementation, and also in terms of how we can be able to create enough capacity and facility for us to move this country forward.
It's a good thing that you've mentioned how you said that you are prepared. I'll be asking the question of how more have you prepared? Because now we have the pioneer class of the junior secondary, and you say you're prepared. You will be telling us about that. But back to you, Doc. Looking at parents, they have raised some pertinent questions, and which more you say very well is that indeed it's the economic turndown for any country, not only Kenya's. And they have even raised quite a concern when it comes to the matters of uniform for our junior secondary. And the CS talked about the board will agree on something, the board of the school will agree on how our grade 7 pupils will be, or students for that matter, will be dressed. This is a pertinent question in terms of uniform. Taken my kids to school, and you've also done the same, and you know, right now, for somebody who does not have a good source of income, that is an additional expense, something that maybe they should have been touched on.
I agree. That's a concern because it touches on our pockets, and this is January as well, and we always ask Kenyans, and that it's the world over, we fail to plan for January, and we always fail to plan for back to school. But nonetheless, I mean, I fully do understand the concern of most parents when we're talking about actually uniform. Personally, I think that, and I want to make this comment boldly, I made a similar comment some time back that we need to really reconsider boarding school issues. And I don't think I was taken seriously until the government started talking about it. I also want to actually make these bold statements that maybe it's time that we need to rethink about uniform. In the world over, school uniform is really not an issue. And I know that it's a structured way that we actually tend to think of discipline. But to me, I don't think that it's really one thing that we should be focusing on a lot more as a policy, that schools or pupils or students must be in school uniform. I know I've thrown a bombshell. We'll discuss that later in future. But with regard to the changes that actually touch on our pockets, Troy, you remember when we were on this table a few months back, we're dealing with the issue, and I kept saying that it was wrong for the minister then to actually create a scenario whereby we were talking of junior secondary school being created in a high school. That was a major transition issue. When you compare that issue to what we're dealing with now, I mean, the issue of uniform is pale. And so I want to first of all thank the government for actually reorganizing that. I mean, remember we spent nearly about 23 to 25 billion Kenya shillings when we were building the classes. I don't know, some of those classes will be rendered useless. Some of those classes will be used by those institutions in which they were built.
Why would you say some classes will be deemed useless?
No, I mean, but if you build a classroom for a junior secondary school in a secondary school, and then now we have decided
the government decided that it will be domiciled
in primary school. That's a building that is out there that is not that school had not planned to put up. They might not have immediate use for it. It'll just sit there. That is about 880,000 Kenya shillings that is sitting there. And that is what you face when you actually have wrong leadership. And I'm going to be bold. I mean, we like I said, education sector is now off steroids. We were running it with steroids, and that's what brought a lot of anxiety. But I'm bringing that background to just share with the parents that actually what we're dealing with now is a much better, a much easier, simpler problem than what we would have dealt with had the government, through the leadership of the minister now and President Ruto, not really change that decision. That hey, you know what? Let's have junior secondary school domiciled in the primary school. So back to the issue of uniform. I really don't see why it should be a different uniform. I really do not see why, if I'm moving from class 6 to 7, I'm already in my school, I already have my, unless some kids that have been overfed over Christmas and have grown a little bit oversized. But really, it should not be and cannot be really an issue that is brought back to parents now to actually have to deal with. And on that, I disagree with anybody, even if it's the ministry. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think that there should be a uniform discussion. That, parents need to actually go and get a different uniform. In fact, that can be a slowly transition. And by the way, that has very little to do with issues of curriculum delivery. At least that, to me, is what we need to be focusing on.
All right. The reason why I brought it up quite early is there was a concern by a parent who texted and asked, can you kindly ask this? Because this is something that we're being told in the next 2 weeks we're supposed to have done that.
Which is why I think, Troy, it's wrong for the ministry to even bring that up as
continue with the
just continue, and that's what I'm saying. The ministry should not. If they brought that as a policy conversation, that is poor thinking. Okay. They should let parents the kids just go back with what they have, and then transition slowly.
Nyambane, you talked about we are ready, and from the confidence in your eyes is that from your school you're quite ready. What are some of the infrastructural adjustments that you have had to make to ensure that you are ready? Because you said you're ready. Some schools are not yet ready, and even the assessment is not quite yet done, but you say your school is ready.
Thank you very much. I still want to say that we are in the 21st century. And the fact that we're in the 21st century, we ought to adopt an education system that actually will address the issues that we face today. And for me, that's the rationale behind the establishment of the new curriculum design that we have now. I will not sit here perhaps to poke holes here and there, because I know there are so many that I can do. But basically, the CBC curriculum ought to be, implemented in a status where we have even facilities to support it. For example, if you talk about identifying potential, you need to have, for example, a sportsman. You cannot be able to identify the sportsman without the facilities. Medical school, where I come from, we have the state-of-the-art facilities, and we have already recruited experts of international stature.
And maybe because, with all due respect, your school could be the schools that do not have any challenges when it comes to finances, but we are also looking at other schools as well.
Well, I am aware of that, but obviously the economic constraints are global, and I wouldn't suggest that we don't have financial issues, but I'll say that for us to implement a curriculum that we have already chosen, in our school we already have state-of-the-art facilities like the sports that will assist us to nurture the talent. If you go to our classrooms, when you talk about ICT, CBC is all about integration of ICT in learning. You have that problem as major issue in this country, major in the public schools. But again, that one does not stop the government from implementing the CBC curriculum. Where I come from, in Merisho School, we already have the ICT equipment in the classrooms. And that's why I started by saying that we are actually the model school to implement CBC as a world-class curriculum.
All right, let me hear from the technology evangelist himself. Looking at what he's saying is that we sit kosawa. We done. We have already put that, but it narrows down to availability of resources. And he has touched on matter sports and technology. But looking at what we have, the assessment being done, there are some schools, even the CS is talked about, the assessment is not quite done yet. There are some schools which have not yet been given the thumbs up. I would like you to touch on technology, because the CBC
Ben,
is
if
touching...
you would allow me, please.
Yes.
Something before
yes. Okay.
comes in. When we came here, one of the members of parliament, Honorable Mumina, just spoke to us and said the children in the northern part of Kenya are not ready to go to school. And the question is why? There is all about the basics. There is no food because of drought. I would just request the government or the Republic of Kenya, instead of us building, mega road projects, we look at the young people in that area and have an affirmative action, redirect our finances to ensuring there is free food programs. An hungry man, or an angry man, is an angry man. That is why, even where I come from, we provide food first to the learner, make the learner comfortable, let them eat. This is the basics of this is the basics of the government. Any government in the world must ensure that they provide the basic human rights. If you don't provide the children with food, I don't think we are going to the right direction. You'll be giving policies to people who cannot actually benefit from the same. Medical school, food is very key for us. The boy will eat, not just eat, but eat very well. Then
again,
you can be able to exercise.
To availability of resources. And your school is more or less an international school, right?
No,
it's not an international school. But if we go to the fees, I'm quite sure a number of parents will be surprised by the figures that you will mention. We are also factoring in those in public schools, and as you rightly put it, schools also in the northern frontier. Maybe, Doc, you can chip in with that.
Well, I mean, so let me just make a brief comment, and then I come to technology on the issue of school feeding. I think that is important. The issue of you remember government in the last 3 to 6 months has been distributing food. That shows you that the issue of famine is real, and they're not just distributing food in schools, but also distributing food to families, vulnerable families, which therefore means that maybe we also need to, from a policy point of view, we also need to explore the possibility of providing lunch. Or a hot lunch, or just maybe one meal in all the schools in Kenya, because that's a problem. In fact, that is why I was thinking that maybe we need to move away from uniform and focus on this. I mean, you and I went to school with very minimal clothing, if you can remember, and we still learned. I mean, I remember my early learning. I was sitting on a stone under a tree, and actually that tree is still there. I always, whenever I go back to my primary school, I still point to it. That from my class 1 to 3, I was under this tree and sitting on a stone writing from my lap. But at least, even with that kind of harsh condition, if you didn't eat, you can imagine. So I think that it is important that the government actually addresses the issue of food and famine, especially in schools. I know that a human being can survive on one meal a day. It's possible. Of course, I'm also trying that, but that is by choice. As you can see from last time, I've lost a bit of weight. So that is. But I want to come to technology now.
Yes.
And Troy, I think part of the reason you invite me here is because you know that I say what I say.
I remember you talking about the boarding schools. We are going to be touching on that as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how did we even end up with that discussion now? I mean, maybe I'm a prophet of doom. Or maybe I'm just a prophet, not a prophet of doom.
They have adopted a lot of policies, some of which we have already mentioned here.
Yes. So if you look at the issue of technology, I want to say that it is unfortunate that the laptop program failed. The laptop program failed on 2 reasons. One, there was a decision by government, and I participated, and I told government then, the leaders then, the decision makers then, that the device that they were picking was a wrong device. Form factor, they picked a tablet, while they sold to the country a laptop. And the laptop was the best device that actually should have been procured. We procured 1.2 million tablets that are basically, of course, such devices don't rot, but become obsolete. And we'll basically throw them away if we don't figure out a way of actually refurbishing them. That was the first mistake that actually we did. And then number 2 mistake was that we did not prepare our teachers well. Teacher capacity building or teacher training or teacher readiness was not done well. It was done haphazardly, and that is partly why that failed. However, I still think, as Nyambane says, that schools that deploy technology will definitely succeed. And I think that with CBC, the use of technology will be inevitable. So government needs to start planning, and we have to figure out how actually to deploy technology in school. Let me say something that might confuse everyone a little bit for now, but I think that CBC as a curriculum and a competency-based education can be deployed effectively using what we call artificial intelligence, and that's basically the next frontier where we actually have to invest in, because CBC curriculum delivery requires that actually you help a learner to chart out a pathway. And with that, you actually use data from before, continuous assessment, to project which pathway the learner might go. You heard Nyambane saying that, we're looking at sports as well. Sports is not just basically seeing a child playing soccer or playing any other thing or just basically swimming. It's important that you capture data from early childhood to maybe grade 6 or grade 7 of this child, enter it into a system using artificial intelligence as a technology platform or tool that can be used to help define a learner pathway. That way then you begin focusing on the learner's competence, because then we know Troy is good in broadcasting and or communications. So we need to actually channel this child along those lines. So the use of technology is going to be inevitable. We will actually have to use it. I also want to share in less than 1 minute my personal experience. Actually, this is my second child who is fully on an online school. Today, my child is using a laptop and a tablet to learn from the house. My other child has used I'm talking about, I'm not preaching wine.
University, diplomas, or...
No, okay. Let me give you a perfect example. My daughter, who is now third year, she's in France on an exchange program, but actually a student at USIU, was in Alliance up to Form 3, dropped out. I enrolled her on an online, in an online school, and she's now third year, doing very well.
Everything online?
Everything online. Everything online. I'm talking about my own daughter.
But unfortunately...
Her name is Fura. Let me just finish the other point. My son, who is 10 years, began school about 2 weeks ago, fully online, 10 years, grade 6. So I'm not talking about things that are impossible. I'm sitting here in Kenya. Of course, somebody can say that, yes, I'm privileged, but I come from Fangano Island in Lake Victoria. Which is fairly
and of course, I'll be asking, a lot of people will ask, why did you decide for such a young child? And we don't have that system is not quite robust. Some people indeed, as you've said, privileged, do that here in Kenya, but there's the aspect of the kid being in school with other students. And why did you just choose that my kid will be doing everything
that
online?
Kid will not be in school kama hajakula to begin with. So as much as we want the kids to go to school, that kid will not be in school kama hajakula. But of course, you know, once or twice a week they go for chapel in school and they're able to interact, and then he goes to church over the weekend. So he has opportunities to really interact. But this idea of saying, so that deals with the issue of boarding school. But most importantly, I'm just saying that technology is possible as a tool to promote and facilitate teaching and learning. That is possible. Today, I am a testimony. I can testify about my daughter, 20-year-old daughter, and I can testify about my 10-year-old son.
You wanted to add something on that, because that is quite something.
But don't let that be the topic.
No.
Okay.
That would be quite something, because each and every school, according to the government, has to have some level of technology, because CBC has some level of technology.
Yes.
That is why they have decided to ensure that the schools have electricity. They are housed, not the trees and stones that we have seen previously. You wanted to add something on that?
I just wanted to add something on what Dr. Arias said. That one of the core competencies of CBC is digital literacy. Sometimes I find it too ironical that you know, a 21st century boy or girl should be able to use the digital, you know, gadgets. But one of the major challenges we have in our country today, yes, we are going to implement the CBC curriculum, but how many teachers of the ICT skills? How many, you know, we will keep on talking about, you know, the government doesn't have money, the government doesn't do what, but it's all about priorities. Education is the major component of transformation. And this starts with even an individual, because you go like in the US, you find that the governments there will empower an individual citizen. And the best way to empower them is to give them the best quality education. Therefore, we will discuss about the resources come rain, come sunshine. But I just want to make it like all of us Kenyans take responsibility and try to complement what the government is unable to do. And the government being unable to do is not the people in government. It's us, the people of the Republic of Kenya, who are unable to give out taxes that are required for proper capitation in the education sector. However, I just want to encourage the government to just put more, support the private sector. Where I come from, the private sector, to put more classes. We have so many classes. For example, our policy in my school, Merisho Boys, is that we have 30 students per class. What is the policy of the government in the public sector? You'd find a class with 80 boys, or including girls in a class. How will you measure the competencies? How many teachers does the government hire? We are seeing the Teacher Service Commission is hiring 30,000. Are they enough to meet the inflow or the influx of learners in our education sector? Did we make a mistake of accepting CBC? The answer is no. Because in the 21st century, we must also empower the teacher to meet the demands of the 21st century learner. You cannot give me a learner of the 21st century and then you don't give me the facilities necessary to support what this specific curriculum design is all about. By the way, that is why the private sector, particularly I speak about Merisho, we give an alternative, we complement what the government does. And I will invite all the parents watching me now to visit Merisho and see what is all about CBC. All right. Yes.
Now, from what he's talked about is a pertinent question that has been raised by some of the private institutions, because they talk about we are also hard-pressed financially, and the government is telling us there are some, of course, we have to add laboratories, and of course, we have to stock them. And he's talking about more or less a partnership between the private and the public, between the government and the private sector, so that they may also be able to share in or help them to put up, because the infrastructure, you have been an educationist for years, you know infrastructure, the school infrastructure, when you talk about technology, is quite robust, and we want or will need a lot of money. But now, looking at even the money that the government is giving for capitation, for learners, for the food feeding program, is not quite sufficient. Now, if we reel in the private sector as well, that will be an extra burden on the government's shoulders. What do you think?
The private sector really is the engine of growth, be it in business, be it in education. And so you realize that even the teachers who are teaching in public schools, and Troy, I know, hata wewe, labda watoto wako wanaenda private school. Yes. Okay. And so you realize that private sector really is the measure of quality, measure of standards in many ways, because government does what we call mass services in terms of numbers. But Troy, you've asked me a question where I tend to have a slightly different view. That are we beginning to move away from brick and mortar? We've not even begun to have that discussion. That it should not be really about brick and mortar. And I'm really shocked that we're even having this discussion just 2 years after COVID, or maybe a year after COVID. It basically shows you that there's very little that we did learn from the pandemic. Very, 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 very little. I am telling you that my daughter finished her high school during the pandemic. The whole year. That's why she's now 1 year ahead of our peers, because of use of technology. So in this partnership that Nyambane is talking about, I would be within order to actually say that the partnership should be more on the technology side, not really brick and mortar. Because you realize brick and mortar, we closed those schools for how long? For 19 months. They were closed. They were useless. Actually, some schools were closed for good.
Yes.
Some schools, some facilities were auctioned because the proprietors could not, pay the loans.
And why I brought in the private schools is because they feel a huge gap that the government does not feel. So they kind of act like a reliever for government and also for choice. If a parent wants to take his or her own child
Do you know
to
what's
a private
happening in
institution
Uganda?
or a public institution.
Do you know what's happening in Uganda?
In regards to what?
In regards to private schools versus public?
No.
In Uganda, we have 70% of learning happening, actually 77% of learning happening in private schools. Up to a point whereby the Ministry of Education has a directorate designed and set aside for private schools. And only about 25% are actually in public schools. That is just in the neighborhood here, which means that if Uganda is designing education policy, private schools are number one, because that's where the majority of the population actually goes. So we don't even have to go far. Ni hapa tu, anzia hapa Busia, Malaba. That is really what is happening. There are more private schools and more students, pupils in private schools than in public schools.
All right.
So what do you think the ministry is doing? Focusing on that.
On that. And the teachers themselves, because Uganda, I'm quite sure that now the private sector is very robust.
Exactly.
And because I've never gone to a private institution that has shortage of teachers, a shortage of resources. I would like us to touch on teachers themselves. We've heard that 30,000 will be employed in the next couple of weeks.
Yes.
And 30,000, they have argued that is a drop in the ocean, but it's a good step that the government is doing. 30,000 will able to alleviate some of the shortage that we have ever had. We've never had full teachers. Even when we were in school, there were still some gaps in teachers. But now we have teachers who will be teaching the pioneer class, junior, secondary. We do not have a syllabus for that. We do not have an institution, maybe like we have institution for primary school teachers or secondary school teachers, but we will have to do it. I'd like you to touch on that in terms of teachers.
Thank you very much. I just want first and foremost to commend the government for the step being taken. I know we are a deficit of 120,000 teachers. But as I said, step taken towards the positive, we always recommend that to be the case. But the issue will always come, yes, you have employed newly teachers, but they have capacity. You know, we already have even the existing teachers. What is the capacity? I think we need to do auditing. I know the trainings took place sometime last year, or especially on the CBC. But again, what was the outcome, or what is the impact of the trainings that took place, particularly for the CBC? My humble opinion is that we need to have regular in-service trainings. And that one means that if you assemble teachers in a sub-county, for example, and teach them the CBC curriculum within 1 week. So the point is, do they even understand how to understand the documentations, you know, so many records that are required to implement CBC? Then I just want to say that we have a good curriculum, and I know the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, they are doing their best to give us the design soon. I just want to remind Kenyans that this CBC curriculum is not just Kenyan curriculum. The rationale is informed by so many, both state and non-state actors. The point is that this is a global curriculum that requires global approach in terms of implementation. And the fact is that the way we are doing it right now may not be necessarily, I think, is a knee-jerk reaction. Previous governments, present governments, one government. You know, employment of teachers, good. The question is, do we have capacity, skills? Us in the private sector, especially Merisho School, we have specifically trained teachers, 30 teachers.
In-house?
In-house. We do it in-house with all stakeholders involved. We have a team of teachers ready to implement CBC in a global way. And that talks about our vision, trying to mentor a boy or to make the boy become purpose-driven, a global leader. So we need to just let our government continue employing teachers, yes, but the most important thing, also give them capacity in terms of retraining them on how to implement the CBC curriculum. The other confusion is we have CBC, we have 844 system. These teachers who are employing, we're going to give them the CBC classes. Where have they been teaching that CBC? Do they have a previous experience on the same? Are we going, what is it happening? Who has the responsibility of trying to ensure that this is not a trial error? Who is going to actually make Kenyans believe that the public sector education is actually implementing the core tenets and the objectives of CBC? The government has set aside, the president set aside the task force. I highly congratulate him. But now, what are they doing? Do they have objectives and goals? I just want to see this partnership between the private and the government sector should just come handy, especially during this time, particularly the facilities that are actually existing in the private sector. If you visit, and I just want to urge you, just take a bus, go to Isinya, Merisho School, visit that school.
All right.
See the kind of facilities we have.
What Doc has to say in regards to the capacity of the teachers that we are employing. It's a good thing that we will test the waters for the junior secondary this year, a year that is not clogged like last year, but one where we had to clog everything into 1 year. We now have the 3 terms that we've usually had, and we are expecting that, of course, there are some challenges with everything new. I would like you to touch on the capacity of the teachers that we have in regards to the CBC. We have a hybrid system. The good thing, Nyambane has pointed out that how do we increase capacity from what we had from our 844 system teachers to the new CBC?
Troy, I have to commend the government for, even the previous government, especially for handling on how they handled transition after having lost nearly a year and a half. How they handled transition to actually bring COVID issues and bring that to actually its normalcy. Now, when we start the normal calendar year going forward in the education sector. In education, hire the teachers, train the teachers, feed the kids, ensure that they're healthy, and watch magic happen. That is the truth. When you hire the teachers, capacity build them regularly, and of course pay them well. Pay them well. Let me repeat that: pay them well, and watch the magic happen. I think that again I must commend government, TAC under the leadership of Nancy Macharia, ministry under the leadership of Honorable Mashogu, and the president taking the lead on this. Getting 30,000 teachers to be employed, that's a good start, a good progress, a good step in the right direction, and that's something that we commend them. Now, what they need to do, even the 330,000 teachers that are already in service right now, need to be trained, need to be retooled in order to actually support the students. I think KICD has done a good job in preparing the curriculum, but the teachers need to be continuously retooled, and that is one thing that the government is doing. You remember that at some point there were court issues around this teacher professional development thing. It's something that I really support, that should be happening all the time. I told you that DLP, Digital Learning Program, the laptops project failed because teachers were not adequately prepared. Start with the teachers, prepare them well. Kids will always learn.
All right, all right. And because of the interest of time, I see our time is up, but I'll give you 30 seconds to wrap it up.
Thank you, Ben. I know I didn't speak much, but I just want to say one thing. On 21st, this weekend on Saturday, I would like to invite all the stakeholders.
I wanted something that
to Merisho, just for an open day.
Okay,
see,
I think they're going to come.
Yeah, to see what is all about CBC.
Them,
yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Doc. And thank you so much, Nyambane, for your insight.
Thank you very much.
They are both education experts, and we also have a technology evangelist who says that indeed technology is the way to go, but we also have to push the right buttons. Indeed, that's where we wrap it up. Thank you so much for watching KBC News Check. I'm giving the baton to my colleague Khalid Abdullahi on the other side of the studio. We have Kruzi, Mashinani, and Tamrini. Remember, we continue this conversation on social media, and our sign language interpreter is Susan Thuku. Thank you so much for watching.